So the good news is that everything I'm going to go over this week, you've already learned. So we're going to do brief reviews of several different kinds of pronouns, how to form them, how to know which one to choose, especially when you go from English to Latin. There is some other videos you can do a search if you're like, oh, I don't remember everything about this pronoun. I've done longer videos for each of these kinds of pronouns so that you can search for it, and if you want to take a look, that's there for you. Otherwise, we're going to do a quick review of each of these. All right, reflexive pronouns. Reflexive pronouns direct or reflect the reader back to the subject, and the subject is the most important thing here to be able to identify. And a personal pronoun would say, you see me. A reflexive pronoun says, I see myself. And when I talk about myself, I'm referring back to the I there. Me is not the same thing as you. This person is talking about somebody else. The waiter serves us. Us has nothing to do with the waiter. Here we serve ourselves. Ourselves is reflecting back to the we. Okay, referring back to we. Thrown in, she made dinner for her. And in here, because I know the context of all the different sentences around her, I know she's not talking about herself. I know she's making dinner for a friend. In this one in English, I happen to see it without any context at all is necessary. She made dinner for herself. And because it has herself, she's talking about she. It's reflecting back to the subject. And what reflexive pronouns in English all have in common is they all have a suffix, if you remember, of self or selves. So if you look at your reflexive pronoun chart, which is in your chart book, you'll notice that there are no genders and there are no nominative forms. And remember, there's no nominative forms of reflexive pronouns because reflexive pronouns always direct attention toward the subject. And so it can't be directing its attention back to itself. That doesn't make any sense. You cannot use myself or yourself or himself as a subject. Only I or you, he, she, it, or they can be a subject. So if I said Eric and myself made the baby cry, that's not proper English. I can only say Eric and I made the baby cry. So pretty easy. So one thing to remember is reflexive pronouns always direct attention toward the subject. That's probably the most important thing. And never serve as the subject of the sentence. That'll tell you when to use them. Okay, personal pronoun. Personal pronouns, if you look, do you see them mehi, mihi, me, tui, tibi, te, nostri, nobis, nos, nobis, vesti, vobis, vos, vobis. They are almost exactly the same, except there's a nominative. What's different about them from reflexive is third person is different. So they look almost the same as first and second reflexive pronouns, except personal pronouns have a nominative. So how do you know which to use? And I'm talking about going from English to Latin. So what you have to do is you have to look at the context of the sentence. And it might be what's in the sentence itself. It might be the sentences that are surrounding it. But I won't give you an English sentence in Latin that doesn't make it clear whether it's personal or reflective, okay? But you need to know that because you might see other sentences and need to know which one to do. So personal, he poisoned him with hemlock. That means he poisoned him, and he are two different people. And basically he poisoned some other guy. Because remember, they don't go back and reflect to the subject. Reflexive, on the other hand, he poisoned himself with hemlock. And that himself tells us he's talking about the subject, he. So pretty easy there. Again, if you need review on personal pronouns, there are longer videos on YouTube that you can search in the channel that will give you longer explanations. All right. Reflexive pronouns, personal pronouns versus intensive, the pronoun Ipse. So last week we reviewed the intensive pronoun Ipse. Now, are you connecting that it has similar translations to the reflexive personal pronouns mei, tui, sui, himself, herself, itself, myself, yourself, ourselves, themselves? So the question becomes, how do you know which one to use when translating from English into Latin? And reflexive says, you remember reflecting back towards yourself, reflexive says, I made myself a milkshake. Remember, reflexive pronouns always refer back to the subject. They are necessary to the understanding of the sentence. If I took out myself, I made a milkshake, it would still be a complete sentence, but you wouldn't know whom I made the milkshake for. The myself gives us new information. So myself gives us new information, and that's important. Now, an intensive says, I made a milkshake for the Duke himself. Okay, so same self words here, but you're going to use the intensive. And the reason is intensive pronouns are used to emphasize another noun or pronoun. They do not need to refer to the subject. Himself here refers back, doesn't reflect, but it refers to the Duke, which is an indirect object. An intensive pronoun doesn't give us any new information and thus can be taken out of the sentence without changing the meaning. If I said I made a milkshake for the Duke, doesn't same meaning. I can't mistake I made a milkshake for the Duke himself with I made a milkshake for the Duke. If I said I made myself a milkshake, that tells me specifically who I made it for. I made a milkshake tells us I could have made it for somebody else. Simple, pretty simple difference. Okay, last one. Reflexive, possessive adjectives. Remember that the genitive case of first and second personal pronouns can never show possession. Remember when we did that? Reflexive possessive adjectives are used instead. So reflexive possessives are exactly like the reflexive personal pronouns meus, tuus, and suus. Remember, if you need stuck or you need help, go back and do some search on that. The possessive, and you have a chart for these already. So like all adjectives, all you have to do is have the possessive adjective match the object of its possession in gender, case, and number, because it is an adjective. We'll look at a couple of those. Paremus patri nostri. We will obey our father. So where is it? What's matching? Because it's an adjective. Whose father is it? Our father. So it's got to be the same gender, case, and number as patri. Sacerdos suum templum intrabit. The priest will enter his own temple. So suum is describing the temple. Whose temple? His temple. So it has to match in gender, case, and number. And if you remember, use suus when the object is showing the possession. Use eus when the one possessing is someone other than the subject. So if I said he eats someone else's food, I'm going to use eus because I'm not talking about, the subject is not possessing the food. The subject is he, but he eats someone else's food. If he eats his own food, then you use suum because it is the subject, which is he in the edit. It's his food, right? And if you remember, it actually has to match gender, case, and number to kiboom. And this is just the genitive, right? It's not an adjective. This is the adjective form. So you have to understand if it's an adjective or it's strictly acting as the genitive. Also, again, there are more videos on these in greater detail if you want to remember more and see more examples, have more explanation. But other than that, here's your review for the week.